We are here with episode 4 of SWADEcast, where we're going to be talking about hindrances.
Is it Swade? I am Swade! The whole thing is Swade! I can't
Yay! All right. We're here. Mike is back, even though in our recording schedule you were here last time, and the lost episode, because I didn't like that episode, so I literally just trash canned it. That's why it felt weird saying episode 4, because 2 weeks ago we recorded episode 4.
That's right. Episode 3.5.
Yeah, it could have been episode 3.5, but it's episode trash can. But we're here with Mike and Susan, which actually means we have, I want to say a full house, because, sometimes we might have a fourth on, Dan, somebody else who works for the channel. But we're going to be talking about hindrances. But before we get into that, we have the bog standard, what have you been up to? And I feel like we need to hit it this time because, Susan, you've been up to a lot.
I have been up to a lot. I have been running around from comic convention to comic convention. I was just at Emerald City and then C2E2, and really just had a great experience both in Seattle and Chicago with our comics Awake and Nyx, but also just it was amazing to see how many folks were just out there playing game. And I think I've just noticed over the years of going to comic convention how much role-playing games have really taken off, throughout that whole community.
I'm actually more jealous of you than I knew because 2 of my film school friends, literally these 2 guys were like my best friends freshman year because I hated my roommate, so I slept on their dorm floor. And their production company was at Emerald City. And I'm like, well, fuck, if I was at Emerald City, I would have got to see them.
That's right. And I love Emerald City.
They were actually, if you saw film crews going around recording stuff for Emerald City, they're the company that was in charge of the other companies doing all that.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. I'm a failure in my friends group. So, but things coming up. This will probably be out by the time this airs. We record so far in advance. I don't know when it's going to air, but I will be on SWADEcast either soon or have been recently. It should be the episode after they interview wildcards.
Do you mean SWADEcast?
Yeah, SWADEcast. This is SWADEcast.
Right now on SWADEcast.
I did not steal this name from them. It is wholly different and highly unique.
Completely.
Completely. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'll be on SWADEcast. I'm being interviewed tomorrow night for that. So
sweet.
It's weird when you're constantly having to hunt down how to email people and get in touch with people to be like, hey, will you be on my show? And you wake up one morning and they're like, hey, we saw your Wildcards interview. Would you like to be on our show?
Nice.
Sweet.
Weird.
You're a big wig. You're not going to talk to us anymore.
No, you're my employees. I have to talk to you. Or at least I'll talk to Mike and tell him to talk to, you two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, I've also been prepping for ChupacabraCon because that's my everyday right now. Between
awesome.
Finishing Hellgate High and all of that. Hell, that could be our next episode because I had to do this decision between physical minis and paper minis. And I went, fuck it, I'm buying a printer. So...
Yeah.
Mike, what have you been doing other than apparently eating too much beef jerky?
Yeah, well, this past weekend we went on a hike, so it was like an overnight thing. I ate a lot of beef jerky. Other than that, I restarted my original Fate game that we played for 3.5 years, and then it fell apart. We actually just, not restarted, but all got back together to, I guess, finish it out, because we never actually finished the game. There were some drama issues and scheduling issues and blah, blah, blah. So, and we're finishing that up, probably 6-8 sessions, just to give the characters a nice little epilogue. Other than that, started sophomore year of ETU. That was good. I don't think anything too bad happened to anybody, though. No real fun stories.
You're not doing it right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The one character who carries around a machete in a duffel bag got caught by his parents, and now he is being forced to go see his childhood therapist. So that's going to be fun next session or whenever it comes up. Because obviously the therapist will probably totally be evil. I also know that this player watches us, so that's true.
Nice. And then Saturday, I'm running a game for you, Susan. We'll finally be doing ETU again.
Oh, nice.
4 hours
Let's see
after...
how many more students I can kill.
Yeah. 4 hours after I run ETU for GMs for hire.
Excellent.
So, yeah, I'm going to be crazy busy. So that's fun.
Yeah, me playing you immediately after I finish my online game. So I'm like, I go from GM exhaustion into player exhaustion.
Yeah, Beth told me, oh, so you're going to be running games all day? I'm like, and my honest response was, well, no, I have 4 hours in between them.
Been there.
Because, I mean, I spend the morning with the family. At noon, I start ETU. It runs till 4. At 8:30, I'm running ETU. So it's not just 2 games. It's 2 games in the same setting.
That's right.
You got to find a way to like roll them together without telling anybody. And
I got to catch one up with the other.
yeah.
And then maybe. So I can just run the same adventures twice. Because right now I'm like, oh God, what game am I in?
Yeah.
And no, I can't do that because one, the roost burned down and the other didn't. Like we are literally playing worst timeline and anything else.
Well, it's a good thing you have the interdimensional guide then, huh?
Ah. I need to get a Tricky Troll logo to just swing in whenever
I was gonna say, I get 10 cents every time I mention it, so
I'm your boss. Why am I not getting a cut of this?
Nathan likes me better.
That tracks.
You get 10 cents every time you mention the interdimensional guy.
Cha-ching! Everyone's made deals behind my back. I'm making nothing.
We're going to undercut Bobby and buy out the channel.
That's right.
Hey, that's a payday. That's fine. That's fine. I'll be an employee. I'd much rather take a paycheck than manage everything.
Me too. Where
Yeah.
does that start?
When we make more money. Yeah, I guess Dan ranks above you because Dan gets a paycheck.
Hey, is this a good time to mention our Patreon?
Swoop, because that's what it actually does. That by the time this comes up, the Patreon will be completely redone too.
Nice.
I need to make a new video for it, but we have all kinds of new tiers. We're gonna have like get videos early tier, then we're gonna have an exclusive podcast tier, then we're gonna have a play in our games tier.
And then we'll have the trash video tier. That's the highest one. You get all our videos from Bobby's trash can.
Yeah.
No, because they're gone. I don't have the hard drive space.
Nobody was going to buy that tier anyway.
Yeah.
Then we should have the interdimensional tier. Ka-ching.
Gotta get like the little like coin operator.
We need a coin that pops up with the Tricky Troll logo. Just
Right,
Yeah.
right.
We are not officially sponsored by Tricky Troll Games. Nathan, why aren't we?
Yet.
Oh, that's what we'll do next week. It'll just be us doing a hard sell.
We'll have him on camera.
Do it.
Pressure him into it.
But yeah, I think that about wraps up what we're doing. We have interviews coming in from Ed Wetterman and Preston. I always forget Preston's last name. It's like Cajun-y. Sorry, Preston. Please still talk to me at ChupacabraCon. But we have those coming in. Mike was gonna help me with that, but horrible personal things. And now you can't afford to go to a con.
DuBose. I don't know if that's
DuBose.
but I think so.
That's better than my brain immediately went Preston Prescott.
Better than none. Yeah, I actually thought of that too, so
Oh, good. It's not just me.
yeah.
All right. But yeah, we'll have that stuff coming up. So there might be a gap in official SWADEcast episodes for a while. Because if I get a ton of interviews, I'm going to be putting those out while they're fresh. Because we'll be doing also an interview with John Goff about Deadlands Dark Ages.
That's amazing.
Oh, nice. Is he the lead on that, or
Yeah. He's running the games for con games for it.
Cool.
I'm going to be playing a Deadlands Dark Ages game and then interviewing him.
Nice.
So I'm crazy excited for that. Hopefully no one scoops us. That's a big reason those videos will be coming out quickly.
Yeah.
Gotta be the first.
Are they they're shooting for a 2019 release for the Kickstarter, right?
I believe so. I'll have answers in about a month.
Yeah.
Oh, good wait.
Well, you hope
I'm
you'll
just
have
going to call
answers.
John now.
Yeah.
We'll see what John says. He might-
No, I'll have answers. The answers might not have any information, but I'll have
Right.
asked a question and he will have opened his mouth. Therefore, it's an answer.
I mean, he will tell you something.
Yeah, exactly. But we got all that coming down the pipe. This has been a very rambly first half.
It's all right.
Probably because me and Mike had the bullshit for a while, hoping Susan would get on, and then like
We
don't have
basically
time to
did
focus.
the whole episode before you got here.
Great.
Basically, not recorded. We were just like, "Oh, what do you think of this hindrance? What do you think of this hindrance?"
Yeah.
Great.
And
Now
it's
I'm gonna come
us,
up with
so-
all my own opinions.
It's fine.
Uh-huh.
It was us, so we only talked about like 3 hindrances. They just all had 15-minute tangents.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But with that, I think before we go into specifics of hindrances, I want to do hindrances first of like topics of the game, because personally, I think hindrances may be the most important portion of Savage Worlds, like as far as components go. So I wanted to kind of talk about why are hindrances important? Why would it be a bad idea for that new player to go in and be like, well, I don't care, I'll just get those advances later. I'd rather not have hindrances.
So are you asking about it mechanically, or are you asking about it like narratively?
Both, because they're both important.
Right. I mean, I guess from my perspective, mechanically it matters because you use those hindrances to buy yourself some good stuff at the beginning to make yourself slightly more powerful. So you bump up an attribute, or you bump up some skills, or you add an extra edge. And I always I don't think I've ever created a character without taking, 1 major and 2 minor hindrances just because mechanically I wanted to get, extra good stuff. So mechanically, obviously, it's super important, but I think narratively, it's even more important. As a writer, when you come up with characters, whatever, if it's in a film or TV show or a comic book or novel, you always have to figure out and know and understand what your character's flaws are, what their weaknesses are, and what are the things they have to overcome, because those are the things that drive conflicts, that create tension, that create an opportunity for characters to sort of change and grow. And that's why I think hindrances in Savage Worlds is, are probably the most important aspect of character creation.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It drives the narrative, or it can.
You also need a way to get bennies.
That is not part of Swade anymore.
I know.
We are SWADEcast, not the LuxCast.
Whatever.
What do you mean?
How many people actually know that? One.
The rule that you get bennies from playing your hindrances is no longer a set rule in Swade. In the things of how you give bennies, they say, oh, you can do this, but it's no longer actually a rule of when hindrances come into play, give a benny.
Yeah. Which I actually prefer, because you don't have to worry about those players who just make like dumb benny machines, and they're like, well, I'm cautious and I'm not going in there. Can I have a benny? I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, I'm not giving you a benny for doing something smart. Get out of here.
Right.
Yeah, the mean character that's like, well, I flip him off. Can I have a benny?
Yeah.
Right. I don't think anybody did. I think that's just modifying the rule book to match what everybody was doing in the first place. It's sort of like you don't want to completely be continuously giving a benny out for the same exact, like, I flip him off again, I flip him off again, I flip him off again.
The thing is with rule books is you have to write for the lowest common denominator, because everybody who's good at the game or who is making good games was doing already. But trust me, by someone who was running Savage World games for random people on Roll20 to get people into the game, yeah, there are people who do that. There are people who do that incessantly.
No, I meant GMs. I meant that GMs were already not giving out, just hand over fist bennies.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, and this is getting us away, I feel like in a lot of ways Swade was written to idiot-proof, quote-unquote, new GMs. Well, no, because the thing is again, good GMs or experienced GMs won't, but that first-time GM who doesn't want to upset people, is already worried they're doing the rules, all you need is the player to go, it says right here, oh, I guess I have to.
Yeah. That's true.
So,
no more rules lawyering for bennies. Darn.
Dang it.
oh, man.
Dang it. As a new GM, though, I always forgot to reward the playing of hindrances with bennies, and my players were always too polite to mention it.
My thing was always, I'm not rewarding it because it's you playing your character. Come up with cool ideas. And I would reward them for playing their hindrances when you thought of how your hindrance detrimentally affected the entire group or you specifically. Mm-hmm. If it's not causing a problem for you, you don't need the benny.
Right.
It's not hindering you.
Right.
I actually take that a step further usually because I mean, coming from a lot of Fate as well, in Fate you have your aspects, and one of your aspects is your trouble, which is your fatal flaw, which is the same thing as your hindrances. So it's like, oh, I don't know, let me pick a hindrance. I'm bloodthirsty, so I'm just going to go kill everybody. And I'm like, that's not good role playing. That's just you doing something it says on a piece of paper. Yeah. Now, if instead you have the bloodthirsty hindrance and your team has just captured this guy that you know you can question and get information from, and your character doesn't care because they want revenge or whatever, and they just kill the dude.
Right.
You just screwed everybody, but you created better role-playing opportunities. Yep. So now you get a Benny. I also bribe players with Bennies a lot, which is also from Fate, because you can invoke consequence or invoke aspects and stuff in Fate. So I'll be like, hey, well, your character is, like, if somebody's on the fence and they're like, well, will my character do this? I'm like, well, your character's a big mouth. So if you say something dumb, shake a Benny at them. So...
Yeah, no, I like it. It's not technically in the rules, and I've always found this weird. At least put it in as like an advice of bribing your players. I am totally fine with attempting to purchase some of your player agency.
Yeah.
Based on your hindrances. You can always tell me no and not take the bennies.
Right.
But if I'm like, hey, I think it could go really interesting if this hindrance came into play right here, but it's definitely one of those things where like it would still be their choice.
Yeah.
Because some of them you can easily be like, the mechanical ones, definitely. Like, you have bad eyes, it comes in because you took the -2.
Right. Or you can't swim and I push you into a lake.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that to me it gets back to like the hindrances that I like the most are the ones that don't have like a mechanical like rule, like -2 or whatever. And I also like I reward the playing of hindrances where they create conflict between the players.
Yeah.
That one I enjoyed tremendously. So, for example, I have one character who has Code of Honor, and so she and another character were sneaking in and finding something in somebody's room, and the first character wanted to steal it, and the person with Code of Honor was like, no. We can't steal it, that's wrong. And so then the other character stole it behind her back, so that was fun.
Yeah.
And it created some, conflict between them about how to manage that situation.
Oh,
so
definitely.
That was good role play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think. Oh, sorry, Mike. What were you saying?
I was mostly going to say that I agree with you for the most part. I don't mind hindrances with a mechanical aspect. Like, that's fine. But the ones that are solely a mechanical aspect, I feel like it's really easy for players to forget about from a role play standpoint. So they're just like, oh, well, I get clueless. -1 to common knowledge and notice. So and that's all they ever look at it as because there's that mechanical thing.
Good point.
But, I mean, a good player and good GM can kind of help steer that a little bit and make sure that doesn't become all it is.
Right.
So, because I love clueless hindrance on certain characters if it's played out rather than just...
Oh, yeah. Well, I think a perfect example is in the current ETU game from Wildcards. Ron Tagath is clueless, and he's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I was going to bring up was I think it was actually best put by Clint when he did his interview on the Wild Die podcast when they asked him about what do people have to say about characters feeling the same. And it's hindrances is where your character's personality actually comes from. Like edges and skills, those are the things you do. But so much of your character's personality is defined by your hindrances. That's how characters actually feel different. You can have two characters with identical skills, identical edges, but one is an alcoholic and one is, well, I'd say big mouth, but those will bleed together. But like one is anemic.
Yeah.
And they don't have to, but you can have two similar. But like, yeah, one's anemic and all thumbs, and one is an overconfident alcoholic.
Right.
Those are very different characters.
Yeah.
I definitely think that's the thing. And more than anything, people who say, characters feel too alike in Savage Worlds need to look at the hindrances. I love how much they expanded hindrances.
I agree for the most part.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into favorites and least favorites. That's what we were talking about before recording. I do, talking about the mechanical side of it, Again, me and Mike were talking before you were able to get on, Susan, but it seems like a lot of the hindrances they added mechanical effects to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's more so. I do hate, and I agree with you, Mike, where the ones with mechanical effects, I feel like it's more likely for players who were going to ignore them, but at least there's something they can't ignore.
Yeah.
Because I've also had players who very actively try to ignore that they have hindrances.
Yeah.
Well, one of the worst I've had, I think it's overconfident. It's the one where it's like, you think you can do anything, but you won't like do things that are obviously deadly.
Right.
And I've had players where every time I'm like, yeah, but you're this. They go, oh, but it says that I won't do things that are obviously deadly, so I wouldn't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you never play this fucking hindrance.
Right.
So for once, do this.
Yeah.
Right. Or don't. And I've straight up said, fine. And I've scratched the hindrance out, and I wrote in the hindrances based on how they were actually acting.
Yeah, a lot of people just take them to take them, which I think is one of my small issues with the expansion of the hindrances. I feel like there are a few that are – there are a lot that kind of overlap or kind of just feel very samey in a lot of ways. And I feel like I've – so like in a fantasy game I ran, Josh, who isn't on this channel, but if anyone ever listened to Dan's 50 Fathoms game, he played in that. He played a character who was a knight, and he took like heroic, code of honor, and what was it? A vow. Knightly order. And then he was like, this feels super lame because these 3 hindrances feel like things I should be doing anyway. So he took like 3 more hindrances for his character.
Yeah.
Just to make him feel more complex and interesting.
Right.
Yeah, we were actually, I was going to bring up the vengeful one we were talking about, which I think we can, but I actually think Code of Honor and Vow are a perfect example of it, because it's this squares are rectangles, but rectangles aren't always squares.
Right.
Where you can have vows to so much more stuff, but by taking a Code of Honor, you have vowed to do this Code of Honor.
Right.
Like vows kind of already lumped in there.
Oh, yeah. I guess I kind of disagree about that.
You can have characters that have like this personal ethical code, but anytime you're taking a Code of Honor based on an organization or a group, which is, it's not everybody's Code of Honor, but again, like a knight or a samurai or an agent or anything like that, it's gonna overlap enough where it's gonna cause problems more often than it doesn't. It's not like it automatically does, but there's a lot of overlap.
Right, and I agree that there's overlap, but they don't necessarily have to like negate one another. Like it's not just like completely duplication. Like for example, you could have someone as part of a say a religious order, and they have a personal ethical code that says you behave in a certain way.
Yeah, and
then as part of the religious order, they're obligated to comply with the commands of whoever their leader is, and then that person starts ordering them to do something that violates their Code of Honor, and then you've got this great conflict between your vow and your Code of Honor.
Well, yeah, it can be amazing.
Right.
Yeah. The problem is the wiggle room or the abuse room of where it also, without breaking anything, can just be doubling up and making, honestly, more boring characters. Luckily, Josh is a great player who will notice that kind of stuff and be like, I took all this because it makes sense, but I realize it's actually boring, so give me more.
Yeah.
Well, let's back up. So as a GM, when you're starting a game and your characters are taking on hindrances and you're talking about like what their characters are, do you go through the process of having them explain, well, what is that Code of Honor, or what is that?
100%.
Because that's when I think you come up with okay, we're going to establish at the front, we're going to make sure this isn't going to be boring, right? I'm going to make you identify what is the vow, what is the Code of Honor, how are they distinct things, so that we don't run into that boring character.
Oh, definitely. I definitely think that's what you should do to fix it. The problem is then also when you're talking about how a good GM runs the game versus how it's in the book, because like we've done the episode on house rules and stuff, in a lot of ways that's a house rule that you're not realizing is a house rule. because no one's making you do it.
Right.
You're doing it because it's better for the game and it helps and fixes things.
Yeah, that's like going back to the example of Josh's character. We sat down. A code of honor itself is pretty specific about how your character acts and who they are and stuff like that. Whereas Vow is obviously a lot more loosey goosey. But like for Vow, he's like, okay, I have a vow to this knightly order. It's like, okay, who's this knightly order? We figured out who they were, and they're very classic, like good guy knights. So I do think in a sense he still has the hindrance of vow to them and his code of honor, but they do overlap a lot in that the knightly order, you need to basically have this code of honor to be in the knightly order.
Yeah.
And it can still be a hindrance because like your order might be like, hey, we need your help. But then that's like the obligation hindrance that they added. And that was what I was going to move this into too. The samey hindrances, vow, obligation, driven, they all feel like they're not exactly the same, but they're all very close. It's like driven is a vow to yourself instead of another person. And obligation isn't quite a vow, but you're still obligated to do something like a job or so. And I know vow garbage man doesn't make a lot of sense. So I understand there, but I feel like they could have turned these all into like one hindrance with a different name. And
I love driven.
I do driven
too.
in what it
but
is.
I think maybe the wording of how it's described in terms of like a vow to yourself. That's whatever I interpret. Like, and a lot of it is like how you interpret them. Like driven to me is like you just have like a passion drive within yourself. It's an ambition. It is a level of selfishness and commitment to something that creates a hindrance between you and everyone else, including anything that you're committed to outside of you.
Yeah.
So I love driven, but I can see how like in terms of the way the language maybe that was used, obligation. I feel like a vow to me is sort of something that is taken on and it's like a real moral commitment, whereas obligation to me can be something mundane.
Sure, I don't disagree.
Something you got to do, even though it's
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
I got to babysit my kid. I got to pick my kid up from school. I got to whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I want to double check how they word vow, but from how I remember it, it's like you swear an oath to something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you really believe in it either. Like, just for example, there are plenty of like
priests. I'm sorry. What?
I was gonna say priests, but then I was like, maybe this is a little too hot button. But there are plenty of like priests who take a vow of service, celibacy, whatever, poverty, and don't follow through with any of that. So it's one of those things where, again, I definitely understand how they can be different. I don't feel like they're necessarily different enough that you need to create a bunch of different hindrances when you could just word one or two hindrances a little better to make them a little more all-encompassing. Because some of them are very vague.
Yeah, down to one hindrance would be a bit rash, but there's some given overlap. Now, granted, some of this is because, while they did finally start cutting stuff in later revisions, let's remember, SWADE was written to try and have every single edge and hindrance that Deluxe had, for better or worse, for conversion. Yeah. And then they finally started cutting edges once they were like, oh, this actually doesn't work in the rules. But they didn't go through with a fine-tuned cone and go, well, now that that's on the table, what should we cull? Right. They just took the ones that had to be taken, not the ones that could have been tightened.
Yeah, I guess it just bothers me a little bit. It's not even like it's not a serious issue. It just bothers me a little bit because some of them are so vague, like quirk. And it's like you can do anything weird and you get the quirk hindrance. And that's
quirk is the catch-all. But what's funny is quirk, what is the difference between quirk and habit minor?
Right.
Not major habit, not an actual addiction. The one where it literally can be things like you pick your nose.
I hate habit minor. I think habit minor is one of the dumbest hindrances in the world.
Because I'm fine with quirk if you took out habit minor, because quirk is that catch-all, like, it's weird and goofy, and it's only a minor. So, like, if you come up with something interesting and we can call it a quirk and comes in, sure, that's a minor hindrance. But habit minor is just quirk by another name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I hate habit minor. I mean, to me, like you said, it's just like quirk. Quirk is also one that's not one of my favorites.
I don't personally like it. I just see it as the catch-all. Because it's good to have a catch-all hindrance.
I agree with you and also dislike it at the same time, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like on the Facebook, it's like, hey, like people are asking for like character help. And
like, make it a quirk.
I want this to be a hindrance, but I'm not really sure how to work it in like the hindrances. And someone's like, oh, that's obviously just quirk. And I'm like,
but it's got to be something that like going back to what you said originally. Sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but
no, you're good.
This is super important. It's not really, but I'm just babbling now. But going back to what Bobby said, it's got to be something that hinders you. It's got to be something that creates a problem, or creates an opportunity, or does something. It has some sort of actual effect in the game.
Yeah.
And I've seen characters really struggle to figure out how does my quirk do that. Other than just be this funny thing that I do.
Now their examples are good. I will say that the examples for their quirks are good, but with it being the catch-all, a lot of people are like, well, no, it's just, I don't know, so it's quirk, rather than it being, no, that's just something interesting about your character. Is it actually a hindrance?
It's not a hindrance.
Right.
Like,
because their examples are like a noble who refuses to eat or drink with lower class people.
Yeah.
That's a quirk. Granted, that would be like some of the, we could actually get into some of that because I believe there's one that better fits that. Because the other one is Zorro, of literally with a swashbuckler has to slash his name, like his initial in. But I'm like, all right, what's that compared to, wouldn't an overconfident swashbuckler do that anyways?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And where's the hindrance there?
Yeah.
That I could actually see because it means you are compelled to leave a calling card.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, but that's okay.
Again, it's
based on what the game focuses on and
maybe it
all
takes
of that.
an extra second, maybe
So
that extra delay.
It wouldn't be an in the moment hindrance. It would be something that bites you in the butt later.
Yeah. I've seen it done well. So, for example, my sister, she's 14. We ran like a short-lived zombie game. And she created a character who was like a street artist. But her quirk was she felt the need to like tag stuff all the time. Like to like leave her mark and like do little bits of like art, like graffiti art. So they were like in somebody's small secure area or whatever, and she's like, all right, I'm going to tag the wall over there. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay, because you're dumb.
Yeah, I think they could have.
You're going to get in trouble for this, but it made sense. But yeah, again, it's a dwarf bragging about their culture doesn't seem like
that's not a quirk.
Right.
It doesn't seem like a hindrance to me either. It's just I guess it could be a little annoying sometimes. If it was a dwarf who brags constantly about his culture and how it's better than everyone else's, then that's a hindrance. But that also could fall under arrogant, or they used to, in some of the settings, they have jingoistic.
Yeah.
Which is actually a really fun but really dangerous hindrance, I feel like, because you can get real racist with that real fast depending on the setting.
What I find funny is we could completely remove quirk, completely take out minor habit, and just write compulsion, because all the hindrances that actually matter and can bite you later are compulsions.
Yeah, makes sense.
And if it's not actually a compulsion, like, well, no, what about you pick your nose? Do you do it without even realizing you're doing it? That's a compulsion.
Yeah.
If you're like, well, no, but I could actually stop if I knew it wasn't in the way. A, that's not a hindrance.
Right.
And B, now it's not a compulsion. And hey, they line right up.
Right. Yeah. I do have a friend who has, as a quirk, that she takes things apart. And that has actually become an edge on occasion.
Nice.
Where she will for example, she disassembled the operating mechanism on a vehicle so the bad guys couldn't use it later. But it wasn't the intention. She just had done it, and then that came to play.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you, it is I think a hard one to figure out, like, how does this hurt you?
Yeah, and that's where I think if it were just changed to compulsion, it would really help, because
Absolutely.
The thing about compulsions are they're actually if-then statements. If this situation happens, you have to do this. It is a psychological compulsion.
Yeah.
So then all the GM has to do is go, how do I get them into that situation when it's bad?
Right.
Not, oh, I do this sometimes. Okay, well, that's not enough. That's not enough of a hook to hang meat on.
Right.
Like, it just won't. But a compulsion is, because it forces the setup. And then when the setup happens, the player actually doesn't get to go, well, no, I don't. Because you go, yeah, you do.
So that actually, what Susan said about her player and the disassembling the car thing, that led me into, I'm just thinking about this. Do you guys ever run into issues with your players where you have a player who just tries to spin their hindrance into something positive all the time?
Well, not anymore, because I changed to you guys as my players. But
that's fair.
Mike, you've played with players I've had.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. So I was just looking, I'm looking at a list right now. I should have the book up on my computer, and cautious.
Oh, God.
It's a great hindrance if you have a player who plays it right. But so many people are like, well, this sounds like a dangerous situation, and I'm cautious, so I'm not going to go into it. I'm like, oh, that makes things a lot more interesting and fun. You're just not going to do something.
Here's how I actually handle it, because cautious has come up more than anything. Cautious was the same one where I've had people, the same player, who's taken things like overconfident, well, but I'm not suicidal. So then they turn around after I've given them enough crap and take cautious.
Yeah.
So when they go, well, no, I'm cautious, I won't. That's when, as a GM, again, this isn't in the rule book, but as a GM, you just go, all right, cool, on to everyone else. When you decide to stop being cautious, you'll be involved in the game.
Yeah.
I get why cautious is there, and like you've said, if played right, it's good, but cautious is similar to some, and mostly these are setting hindrances. These are hindrances what I like to call game breakers, because they basically let the player go, I'm not playing.
Yeah, they make nothing happen.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't make anything happen, they specifically make
nothing happen.
And
I haven't
negative space almost.
Yeah, I have not read Cautious in a while, but my recollection was that Cautious basically says not that you won't do something, but that you always take a lot of time and plan things.
They rewrote it in Swade. They got it better.
Okay, because the way that I sort of make my players, play it is, yes, you're hesitant, and then there's the hesitant new hindrance. But
there's the hesitant hindrance too.
You take and I prefer hesitant. But so you're going to sit there and you're going to plan. You're cautious and you're always going to plan. And if you play it that way, but and you're sort of holding people back from taking action, or somehow hindering your group from moving forward, not just hindering yourself from moving forward, because there is a consequence to that. Like,
sure, you're
too cautious to go through the door, you are never going to find the treasure.
Right.
Exactly.
That's the consequence of that.
Which is why I do the, all right, let's move on to everyone else. Because it typically only becomes a problem when they're by themselves. If other people are there, then either they're like, I'm going to hang back, at which point, cool, we're moving on without you, bye-bye. Right. Or people are like, no, go, and now there's a conflict, and that works. When they're by themselves, you can't have players push them, so I just leave them.
Yeah, I think too. I think probably like my bigger pet peeve is with overconfident. I don't know who decided overconfident is the same as stupid, but too often I see people playing overconfident as, I just go do this, thing in, without regard to anything else, because I'm overconfident in my abilities. And, running into a room full of, zombies, naked and with no weapon, is not overconfident. It's stupid. And I think that there's a line between that.
Yeah,
overconfident is a very fine line, though, because it's one of the hardest hindrances I've seen for people to play correctly, because either they play over stupid, or, like I've said, they lean into it's not supposed to be stupid, so they actually never play the hindrance at all.
Right.
And it's like, well, you got to find the middle, and that is tricky. Overconfident is actually one of the deceptively trickier hindrances in the game.
Also, how it's worded in the book doesn't really help. It says he believes he can do most anything and never wants to retreat from a challenge.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are just like, I can just bull rush into this room. Like, no, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that you think there might be a way to overcome this, and you're sure you can overcome it. That doesn't mean you're overcoming it by doing something idiotic.
Right.
It's actually back to Josh and hindrances. in my sci-fi game, his character has cautious and overconfident. And we talked a lot about how those two hindrances would work together, and his character's a scientist. So the idea is basically his character really likes to plan and figure things out, but once he does, he is sure that that plan is going to work.
Yeah.
And like, there's always a good way to play these hindrances, but
Now, I will say, if someone is overconfident and arrogant, thinking they went, oh, I can take similar ones and double up, then you are over stupid. Because if you're overconfident and arrogant, you kind of would be over stupid.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those people exist. They don't tend to live long, but they do exist.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess to me, like, I wouldn't even mind, like, if there was and maybe there is, and I'm not thinking of it, like a hindrance called brash, which is one of my own personal qualities, where you really do, kind of stupidly, rush right in.
I was actually looking because I could have swore there was one added, and I can't. Oh, impulsive.
Well, there's impulsive, which I like. I actually
also Death Wish that kind of falls under that.
Death Wish was one I was going to bring up when we were talking about overlaps, because when you look at the major version of Driven and then compare it to Death Wish, and then remember, Death Wish is only ever a minor hindrance.
Just weird. So weird to me.
Yeah.
They're so similar.
Yeah. Right. Well, not to mention why it's a minor hindrance is, I really want
because a lot of people take it because the issue with Death Wish, and this is getting a little negative, I want to go into the positive soon, but I've seen this of people who basically go, if you already know what the campaign is, you set your Death Wish goal to be what you already know or are anticipating is the end of the campaign.
Yeah.
At which point it doesn't actually come into play. And every time you're fighting for the Death Wish, you're actually just fighting to keep the game on track, which can be good, but it's not actually a hindrance.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to talk positive.
Yeah. I think I put out a tweet yesterday of like, we need to be more positive in the community, thinking about on SWADEcast, we constantly go negative. We complain.
No, it's not Swade's fault. It's everybody else's.
It comes from a place of love.
Well, not just this. A lot of it is us talking about when players abuse the rules. If the players were perfect, and also if GMs were perfect, this wouldn't be in it.
Right. Well, I would say some of my favorites are I love Code of Honor. I think if you're a beginning player and you're playing your first, Swade character, I think Heroic is one of the best hindrances you can take. Because I did it the other day in a game that we play, where I made a choice to stay and try and protect someone when the logical thing to do would have been to get the heck out, and then created peril for myself, created peril for my colleagues. I love Heroic. I think it's a great hindrance.
I feel like it's one of the gimmies in a lot of games. Like, you should be heroic anyways, but at the same time, I love Heroic. I've done setting rules called like natural heroes. Everyone has Heroic automatically, but I give them some kind of bonus or something. But the hindrance on its own, I love. I think of the new hindrances, my personal favorite is tongue-tied.
Tongue-tied?
Yeah, tongue-tied. Tongue-tied. Because it can be anywhere from you're just bad at like talking to people to you literally have a stutter, and it's -1 to every social skill when you're talking. And I'm like, it's great. I kind of love it. I appreciate, this is slightly off topic, but I appreciate in Swade that there's a lot more plus and -1s.
Yeah.
Deluxe and earlier, I think I did a whole video about it at some point of like, everything's plus and -2.
Yeah.
And I get the concept of, well, then you can only fail in a crit fail without penalties and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but why aren't we using the 1? Why aren't we using the stopgap? And this is one that uses it, which has been like a personal peeve of mine. So it gets bonus points. I actually like hindrances with a mechanic in it because I can reward people when they play them, but they also can't choose to ignore them. And I like that. And I think tongue-tied's a perfect balance because even characters who aren't comfortable with accents or doing voices or stuff, everybody can get tongue-tied. Yeah. So you can either play it up when you naturally do it yourself, and just like, haha, people can just choose to catch themselves up and stuff. It's not as hard as doing an accent or getting fully into character.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone actually can add a lot to a character and to their personality. And not just like from us listening and enjoying, but as a performer, when you start doing those isms with your voice, you get into character. Players might not realize that, but once they start doing it, it will happen anyways.
My personal favorite out of the new ones added was Secret, which I know has been in other setting books before. Minor Secret, meh, it's all right, it's fine. Yeah. But the major version, I love it because it's a hindrance that eventually becomes another hindrance. And I know in SWADE you can now officially buy off any hindrance for an advance, which is cool. But that's also not 100% realistic in my opinion. I mean, certain ones, yeah, a lot of them, sure. But
I do think it's 2 for a major.
Is it? Okay.
It's
yeah.
2.
Yeah.
Okay. But regardless, I like that instead Secret becomes a new hindrance.
Mm-hmm.
It evolves
a lot.
Grows.
Character development. I wish that I actually wish the game encouraged that more, because I feel like a lot of hindrances, like Death Wish. What if you accomplish your goal in Death Wish and you don't die? What happens? Do I have to spend 2 advances to buy it off? I don't have a Death Wish anymore. I accomplished my goal. Am I suicidal now? I wish that I think it would be a cool feature, and I think this is something I'm going to do in my games as like a house rule, is that each rank somebody can swap out a hindrance if something has changed with their character, because characters grow as a game goes. Mm-hmm. And there's no mechanic for picking up or swapping out hindrances other than just buying it off with a couple advances, which sucks.
Yeah, right. I kind of wish there was a hindrance called like aimless.
Yeah.
And maybe even have like the caveat of you can't take a character creation, because what happens if you've had to completely abandon your vow? If you've been kicked out of the group that took out your code of honor, your death wish ended and you didn't die. Mm-hmm. What if rather than those just being this, I don't know, all of those fall under aimless as this thing of if these things happen and your character is now like, I don't have a hindrance, how does my character handle that? You're now aimless.
Right.
I also kind of wish it could be something like, it doesn't take an advance to do it, but maybe like for a skill point, instead you can swap a hindrance, a minor hindrance. Or for 2 skill points, you can swap a major hindrance.
Yeah. I just wish there were more, like with Major Secret, I wish there were more contingencies for what happens when the world makes your hindrance not viable anymore. Because it's one thing to buy it off as a player. It's another, like you said, like you get kicked out of the thing you had a vow to. You might not have any control over that. Is the GM going to make you buy off your vow hindrance? Because that GM's an asshole if he does. He's the one who got you kicked out of the... Well, unless you do something.
Yeah, I will weirdly say I'll be Mr. Unpopular. There are times where I will do stuff based on what the players happen, where I'm like, this is costing your next advance. You don't get to pick your next advance. Now, I will say typically that, for me, that's been stuff like you became a werewolf.
Yeah, you get something.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, removing a hindrance by SWADE's logic is you get something.
I personally...
I don't agree with it, but by their math and everything, it is a net bonus.
Breaking it down to the most base levels of just the numbers, it is technically a bonus.
Yeah.
Right.
From an actual in-play perspective, it is, if anything...
a loss.
Yeah, because you have less to role-play your character around, you have less drama in the game, it's...
Yeah.
Well, also, you're spending down your advances to not take on, greater advantages and edges and bumping up skills. So you basically, I think what it is, you spend 1 advance to knock a major down to a minor, and then another advance to knock the minor out. And so, like what I'm doing with one of my characters right now, because she has habit, is she's basic, and so we're role playing it. She wanted to buy off that hindrance, and I'm like, fine, we're going to role play you're coming out of your addiction. And so we changed how that hindrance played out. So now it's creating another opportunity for additional role play, so that by the time she spends the next advance to get rid of it entirely, there will have been story around it. There will have been opportunity for that hindrance to play out as a role playing function, and I think that's awesome.
I do think that Well, I do get wanting to buy off hindrances that have really negative mechanical effects, like it. And I get it from a role-playing standpoint, too. It makes perfect sense. But it's so many... I mean, more in SWADE than previously do have mechanical effects, but there are still a ton that have no mechanical effects. And
Well, I think the other big, and I don't want to say issue, is the GM section, I feel like should talk a lot more about players earning hindrances in-game as consequences. Because the thing is especially if you're running a horror game and you're running it by their rules, players will be stacking phobias. I've had this issue. That's why I have my own fear rules and stuff. And when I saw you could buy off hindrances, I'm like, yes, that fixes the phobia problem. But then it's eventually players have nothing but phobias now.
Right.
Because they've bought off the other stuff. And phobias are really the only ones where in the game's mechanics you get this. Because buying off hindrances is also no different than having to, and this was kind of my thing of why I go, this sucked up your advance. Because really, how different is that than when a character gets a permanent injury that reduces an attribute?
Yeah.
Typically, characters want to stay and keep trying to stay on the track they are. And if it's the attribute they care about, they feel like they're going to have to spend that advance to take it anyways to get back to status quo.
Right.
So I think if there was more stuff that gave hindrances... Yeah. And I think I wish in the poison section they maybe had a little side box about addiction and gaining habit major that way. I wish habit minor was worded a little better and not just be quirk. Right. So it could be like maybe habit minor is the same as habit major, but you have +2 on your vigor roll.
Right.
So the odds of failing the vigor roll are low unless you crit fail. Right. But you have to make that roll every day. So it's still going to be annoying. Eventually, you're going to crit fail.
Right.
So, like, all right, that's the minor version instead. And now they're both addictions.
Right.
And you can play with that stuff. Things like have an area in the organizations where they go, hey, this could be a good spot where if players want to join an organization, they get the connections edge for free. And they gain code of honor or vow for free. And it becomes a wash. Like things like that. I wish there was more talking about ways to reward players with kind of net neutral things. You get a bonus and a penalty, and you can give hindrances that way and stuff.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, a lot of people in real life develop these hindrances as time goes on. I mean, hard of hearing. Like, people lose hearing. That's a thing.
Yeah.
But there's no way to actually gain it in-game. Granted, I think the idea is a lot of Savage Worlds games don't last that long.
Right.
Actually, game time.
The 40 years that it would take me
to, Well, I mean, hard of hearing, like an explosion goes off.
Yeah.
Right.
Deafens you in one ear. That in the game, mechanically, there's no way to do that.
Might have to work on a swag product of a book of different incapacitation tables based on what did it. Because that's the thing is like it'd be weird if like you got hit in the head and you gained hard of hearing, but if you got incapacitated due to a grenade, totally makes sense that you gain hard of hearing. Stuff like that. But then you're adding a lot of crunch, and it is Fast Furious fun, so we have to figure out that balance. But I do wish there was at least notes and like, here's ideas on how to give stuff. Like maybe not all hazards create fatigue. Maybe real bad hazards create hindrances.
Yeah.
Poison is a hazard. Cold and stuff. Maybe you get hypothermia. And it's not, you have a fatigue, but you get anemic. Stuff like that. Like,
or you get frostbite and you lose 3 fingers.
Yeah. And it's not one-armed. It's, what is it? All thumbs.
All thumbs.
You get all thumbs. If it gets worse... To be fair...
I was just going to call it pincer, but...
For a while... I feel bad because we'd call them crab people, but my wife had a doctor, and it wasn't like her physician, but whenever we'd have to go to the ER for something or anything, we always end up with the same doctor, and he was a vet. And he had one of his hands was like this, and one was like this, and those were his hands. But yeah, I think if you were to take hazards and figure out like a hazards variant where like if you fail, you instead get a hindrance for like X amount of time. If you crit fail, it's permanent.
Right.
you could easily add hindrances in, and then buying off hindrances matters. Or maybe like after so long, you get a natural healing roll to remove one hazard type things.
Right.
Because psychological games and stuff, if you're using the horror companion, you get, or why am I calling them hazards? Hindrances.
Yeah.
If you're using the horror companion, you actually ended up with games with a lot more hindrances.
Mm-hmm.
Or famously, Susan, you weren't part of this. I was running an ETU game. Remember when we did Hotel 96?
Oh, yeah.
And Robert opened, in the adventure Hotel 96, there is a door that if you open it, you see nothing but a void of infinite blackness. And you have to make a spirit check. If you fail, you gain Phobia Major, the Dark. Just permanently.
Permanently.
I love that.
Just you open a door and you are now scared of the dark because you like open the door into like Twilight Zone levels of darkness.
Yeah.
And then just close it. And it just warped your brain forever.
Phobia used to be so much more punishing too, which was, it used to be -4 for phobias.
Yeah,
and I'm like, I never ran that at my table. I always house ruled phobia. I used to do my house rules for phobia. I know we're a little off track, but where if somebody has phobia major and they're exposed to their phobia, they have to make a fear roll.
Cool.
If they have phobia minor, they could make a fear roll at +2. And if they failed their result on the fear table, they just roll 2d6 instead of 20. So that you can't have like the heart attack or gain a phobia from your phobia. It was just like you're shaken or you run away or whatever.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
I always just did the -2 and the -1 whenever the presence.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but in deluxe it was -2 and -4.
Right.
No,
No,
-4 was, you just automatically.
It was so Robert got it, and he realized how much it sucked. Because here's the thing: when you have phobia of the dark, your phobia kicks in whenever you're dealing with lighting penalties, which stack. What was that?
I said Andy was a vampire.
Yeah, and he was a vampire.
Couldn't go out in the sun. So.
It was amazing. It was hilarious.
Poor son.
But no, that actually is making me think, because with me working on that fear rules we were talking about, I need to write a new incapacitation table for mental incapacitation.
Yeah.
I might just make a new physical incapacitation table.
Yeah.
And then basically make the same table as it is and have a hindrance for each of them, a major hindrance for each of them. And if you have the hindrance already, you take the attribute loss.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of
sense.
sense.
So attribute loss is also rare, because while I said it's just like when they have to buy back an attribute loss, that's actually worse because you can only do that once per rank.
Right.
So if you go, well, no, you get a hindrance. If you already have the hindrance, you suffer attribute loss. Mm-hmm. Could make it more interesting, because then you could end up with stuff like head wound, select either clueless or hard of hearing.
Right. Or one eye.
Right.
Like, give this less, and if you have all of them, then you take attribute loss.
Yeah.
I might do that, because I like the idea of you get hindrances, and even then that's like, well, you have the hindrance till all your wounds heal, or for 24 hours and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go, actually.
I guess from my perspective, just in terms of kind of going back to what Swade says or doesn't say, I guess I've just always sort of interpreted that the thing that I always liked about Savage Worlds, and still like about Savage Worlds, is I feel like, and maybe I'm like in the minority here, but I feel like in some ways the places where they don't talk about things or where they don't, write rules, I actually kind of like that, because it already is giving us all so much opportunity and creativity to do these things, to create our own tables, to create our own consequences, to talk about and redefine what the hindrances are, as opposed to like some of the other systems where it is so like understanding of what certain rules definitely mean, or certain spells do this.
It's what I like to call the 3.5 problem, which is D&D 3rd edition and in Exchange 3.5. They tried to go in with this design mentality of, we will write a rule for everything. Yeah, there is no wiggle room, really. It's all coded. Now people house rule and change the rules, or don't know they're breaking rules when they are. But 3 and 3.5 is, here is a code for the entire universe.
Right.
And then when people find places where the math doesn't work, they break the universe. Versus a loose system, which is why in 5th they went to a looser system again. It can adapt. I think Swade is the best at teaching the game. But Savage Worlds has always had, I don't want to fully call it a problem, but Savage Worlds was never actually really written to be your first system for RPGs, which is actually why I find it really interesting with you, Susan, because you came in with Savage Worlds.
Right.
But Savage Worlds actually does a lot of assuming, and luckily you're actually kind of a natural GM of you will house rule and you will make educations and all of this stuff. Most first-time GMs don't do this or don't feel comfortable enough to do this or realize they can do this. And this is also this weird thing of where, as I've said, we've talked a lot of negative stuff about SWADE, even though we all love it, because we have to critique the book honestly. And Savage Worlds has always had this issue of the rules are great. SWADE is the first time they've actually been good at teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
Deluxe and before were never really good at teaching you the game.
I guess, and again, I've said this, dozens of times when I first started, I got the rule book, I read the rules, I read them, several times, but I also watched, dozens and dozens of YouTube videos and whatnot, and actual plays and things like that to see how it plays out. And I do think that there's a limit to the extent any book can actually explain to you in play how this works. I mean, I think and I agree with you. I think SWADE does a much better job. I think it is. Let me change that around. I think SWADE does a great job of explaining how the rules play, how the game should play, how the game should work out. But I think there's also, like, at some point when you're the writer or publisher of a game, at some point you should be allowed to assume that people are going to use their own freaking brains and their own creativity. And at some point you have to, like, take your hands off the back of the bike and let them pedal. And that's what I feel like. I think that SWADE has really sort of hit that sweet spot.
Yeah, I think.
I personally think they're just a little off of that sweet spot, but that's like a bullseye. That's so hard to hit. I don't expect anyone to hit it.
Well, your kid's always going to wobble.
Yeah.
Like,
and we talk about the wobble, basically. That's what this whole show is the wobble.
I feel like SWADE does do a lot more to encourage GM freedom, because I felt like Deluxe, the community, I find the Savage Worlds community very interesting. I feel like you have a lot of GMs who are like me, who are like, I don't give a shit about the rules. I'll do what I want. It's my game. But I also feel like they have a lot of, like, raw, ruled as written kind of people in the community too, who are like, no, the book says this.
Maybe we'll do an episode about that in a few years when we're too big for, like, to worry about pissing off half of everybody, because we've had discussions about that.
I wasn't going to get too specific, but
yeah.
I think SWADE has done a much better job kind of pushing those people to the side a little bit and encouraging a little more freedom and creativity. Because Deluxe, like you said, it didn't teach the game super well, and there's just something about SWADE that's hard to put your finger on, but it feels more engaged towards storytelling and role-playing and stuff. And it's a lot of very, very small changes to it that make it feel that way. But I feel like it's just infinitely better in that way.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree. And I already love Deluxe. SWADE is the most newcomer friendly, and not new to Savage Worlds, new to RPGs.
Right.
And typically when I have critiques and when I'm like, you need to look out for these pitfalls and stuff, I actually try to go from the headspace of the brand new GMs. Mm-hmm. Because, and again, this will kind of touch in the community of stuff of like, well, we don't need new people. Yeah, you do. If we want the community to grow, if we want Savage Worlds to get bigger, it's not about converting people who already found the game they like. It's about finding people that didn't even know they loved role-playing and getting them to play Savage Worlds. And you won't do that by having a book that doesn't teach the game well. SWADE does. But that also has stuff of like, assuming a GM's already going to know how to on the fly go, oh yeah, I can add hindrances to hazards. That is not new GM friendly.
Right.
That's a huge leap.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode on gatekeeping in the role-playing game community and in role-playing game design, but
that sounds like a drunk GM podcast. It does actually, and I'll be on that one happily.
Yeah, I was going to say we'll invite you guys to be guest stars.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
2 years from now when we decide.
Hold on. You need to clear that with your boss.
No,
it's cleared.
Nope, I'm good.
But yeah.
Ooh, Dan? Yeah, we have to talk.
Yeah,
exactly.
Clear it with Dan. But
right, real quick aside.
What's up?
Would you ever let somebody take can't swim as a hindrance in your game unless it was a water-based game?
It
No, but it's
depends.
become a water-based game.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
if it's like you're in the post-apocalyptic desert, I take can't swim. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it's
I
like
just was going
ETU,
through and I saw
if
it.
it's something like ETU, yeah, I will. And then
Yeah.
I'll put a monster in Lake Greystone,
Yeah.
and I'll put a creature in the swimming pool,
Right.
and I'll be like, "Hey, buddy, guess what?"
I'll say, I feel like it's just such an invitation for GMs to fuck with their players.
I think
Yeah.
the best example of that is the GM Hangouts guys and stuff had brought up one that I love of the I take allergy strawberries. Cool. Our next adventure's at a strawberry factory.
That's great.
Yeah. I think that every hindrance should pretty much be an opportunity to a GM to.
Oh, yeah.
They're
I
the
just-
hooks to make the game actually matter to the characters. Even
Yeah.
if you can't weave in the backstory of every character, if you can make their hindrance matter.
I just find Can't Swim hilarious. And
I do too.
I think it's necessary because now everybody can swim because they get athletics for free. But
Yeah.
and would you upgrade it to a major if you were playing 50 fathoms?
Depends on the race. There's a lot of aquatic or semi-aquatic
That's
races.
fair. Yeah.
And
Who
honestly,
can't swim.
right. If I was playing 50 fathoms, I would take swimming out of athletics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would actually probably do skill specialization to athletics because I think climbing's super important in 50 fathoms. And
Yeah, it is.
we've kind of touched on this a few times before. I think skill specialization needs to be used more, but everybody thinks if you're using it, it's for every skill. No,
Right.
what is the really important skill? Like, I think if every setting picked what is one skill we specialize in, I think it could also say a lot. Like ETU, skill specialization academics.
Right.
50 fathoms, skill specialization athletics. Because swimming, climbing, running, all of that are very different. The guy who can climb the rigging needs to feel special.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%.
All right. So on that wonderful note, Mike, you said you had a hard stop time of 1:30.
Yeah,
It's 2:00.
I know.
So we will call it there. We'll say, check out our Patreon. As we said at the beginning of the channel, we're doing a whole bunch of new tiers and new access to stuff. You might get a chance to play in some games, all of that stuff. Speaking of playing in some games, our sponsor, GMs, Game Masters for Hire, the number 4.com will take you to stuff to set things up there. I think that needs a remodel too.
Yeah.
We'll do that after we fix the Patreon.
Yeah, I sent you a whole bio and you never put it up for me.
Did I not?
After
need to get
bugging
that
me for like
fixed.
2 months.
Because it took you 2 months to do it.
Hey.
He's got
But-
a lot to put in there.
Yeah, I know. I have to hit Control C and Control V and
Yeah. That's
all of that. But with that, is there any other parting thoughts you guys want to have on hindrances?
They're good.
Hindrances.
Yeah,
They're good.
They're good. They're not bad. They're not terrible. They're the essential part of Suede.